If you have landed on my channel but somehow haven't heard by now, Sony has announced in 2028 that they're going to stop producing physical games. I normally do review videos, much more mild in nature, and I don't typically do the whole video essay thing, but this was something that I actually thought would be worthwhile to share my thoughts on. So, because this means that there will be no true physical copies of PlayStation games after 2028. Or at the very least, there won't be for first party games. There's a chance that there's some sort of physical production that gets done for third party games, but that's a whole other issue that I'm not really diving into. This announcement has really bothered me. I've never been a big console wars person, but Sony systems have generally had the games that I wanted to play. So even if I were to be late to the party, I was generally an early adopter of PlayStation. The first game console that was actually mine and not shared with my brother was the original PlayStation, and this beat up relic of a game was the first game that I actually bought with my own money. And it hasn't been treated very well over the years, but if you also remember, the original PlayStation games had this very large box format. From a purely business perspective, I get what they're doing. I love physical games, but for the last several years, my main purchase strategy has been to grab digital games for stuff I'm just curious about, and particularly when it was on sale, so stuff like the Steam Summer Sale, like right now, and only buy physical copies of games I wanted to add to my collection. In other words, things that I was so certain I was going to like that I was generally okay with doing a pre-order so it could get to my house the day it was released and I didn't have to go to a store. So probably about 1 in 10 games have I really been buying the physical copies of. GTA 6 being digital only, let's not lie to ourselves about the physical copies of the game, and still selling boatloads of pre-orders was probably the final piece of the data that they needed. They saw that the mega popular game could go cheap in its production, so cutting out physical discs got rid of one of the biggest expenses for the actual production of a game, and still jack up its price beyond what the standard was, because it did boost it up a little bit, but still sell a boatload. And I'm not really surprised, though. It's a super highly anticipated game that has a decade of hype being put up behind it, so it's not like anyone really expected it to not sell well, but it makes a good data point to point at and say, nah, they did it, so we're good. So most purchases probably are digital. But there's an easy solution to that doesn't include killing actual physical copies of games. It's as simple as just doing physical copies in waves of pre-orders or limit physical production. There's plenty of other things like, say, specialty collectible books and whatnot where they only produce as many as they get pre-orders for, or they do extremely limited physical runs of it. I've got signed vinyl and signed CDs back here that are limited copies that were done more or less with such a limited number that they knew they were going to sell out of them, and occasionally they open them up for a second wave of orders, but it's not that hard to do that type of stuff. GTA 6 as an example could have easily had a $150 version that was limited in production, and it was the only one that came with a physical disc, and I guarantee you if that was the only difference between it and the $100 version, it would have still sold boatloads of copies. Limited physical releases could have easily handled the manufacturing cost. It would have just required a bit of coordination with stores in terms of inventory allocation, but probably not much more than what it already does. It would have just had to be a little bit smaller numbers, and so they would have had some retailers a little bit more angry at them. But let's take a small detour before we consider more about the ending of physical games. Right now, we're in the middle of a bit of a consumer revolt. People are looking back to physical media in multiple areas of entertainment because they're tired of being told they don't actually own their digital goods. Vinyl purchases have surged for several years in a row. CDs are growing in popularity as people are starting to discover the ability to home lab their own Spotify, which, if you didn't know, the reason why they're buying CDs for that is because those are digital quality audio. So you get a physical copy of the disc, but you still get one of the higher quality audio formats. And even cassettes are starting to see a new wave of popularity for whatever reason. I'm not sure on that one. It's a cool thing to own, but I'm still not certain on that one myself. Physical movies are surging as things like Plex and Jellyfin grow bigger and bigger install bases, and people are looking to flee streaming services that have started significantly overcharging and have caught up with what the cable companies used to charge. And game collecting has been booming for a long time, especially once they started getting graded copies of used games, which that's a whole other issue, but whatever. The reason for that is simple. People are tired of being told they don't own their digital goods. Finish the sentence for me. If buying digital goods doesn't mean you own them, then... Clandestine approaches aside, we're starting to see some pushback in the gaming sector. Politicians in multiple regions are starting to look at the cause of movements like Stop Killing Games, and while the initial pushes are getting a bit gutted by lobbyists so ignorant that they suggest Minecraft private servers are piracy, which is one of the dumbest things that I've heard a supposed expert say, it's a step in the right direction, sort of. It'll get a foothold, and that's important, but we'll get to that. In my opinion, people are approaching this in a fundamentally wrong way. I love what Stop Killing Games is trying to do by ensuring access even at the end of life for games. I think it's important. I think it should be supported. I would like to see it actually go through. But I think something fundamental about the way we approach all digital goods needs to change. For whatever reason, we've just allowed digital media, games, books, movies, music, art, etc. to be treated as licenses, in the same way that office productivity software is treated. This needs to end, and it's a bit of a weird reason how we got there. It's just early cases involved mostly productivity software, and early lawsuits and whatnot involved actually seeing companies suing over other people trying to breach their license agreements for that software. And a lot of judges that, let's just be realistic, were probably so old they really didn't understand digital goods and still didn't view them as actual goods, just shrugged their shoulders and let all forms of digital goods be lumped into the same categories. So how do we fix that? A single, simple bill that establishes that digital goods that fall into any areas of the arts are not licenses, but are actual goods that are fully purchased. So if you buy a game, you get a copy of a game. If you buy a book, you get a copy of that book. If you buy music, you get a copy of that music. Now, I'm sure there's way more technical things to go through with that, but I just want the term license to be eliminated from those things. You need to have some sort of right of access. Personally, I wouldn't mind if this also came with the corollary that you're responsible for managing your own files and storage of these files. The whole reason PC gamers have been okay not owning physical games is because they still have all the physical files. And the DRM has never been that hard to crack when it was even bothered to be put in at all. And really, DRM is a whole other issue. It's debatable how much it actually stops piracy. And realistically, if you get to digging around, the amount of piracy it stops is probably zero. The people that want to pirate are going to pirate. And generally, DRM just ends up becoming a problem for people trying to legitimately play the game. It wouldn't be that hard for companies like Sony, Nintendo, or Microsoft to just limit how many re-downloads you have, or tie in digital storage of your game library to their online service. While you're subbed, unlimited re-downloads. If you're not, limited to the initial purchase. It's not like storage is easy to get at the moment anyway, so most people would get the subs. And tinfoil hat, I don't feel like storage prices are going to come down because I think it benefits people that are pushing stuff like this for it to not come down. This would also make it so that if companies just give you a simple heads up that they're going to have to remove something from their shop, you'd have an opportunity to go ahead and re-download that copy of it and stash it away, or decide, you know what, I don't care about that particular piece of media, it's okay if it gets erased from my collection forever. But I get the easier choice of working with the system that has been established rather than trying to redefine the whole system, even though it's in desperate need of being redefined. So I understand trying to work with the idea that everything is looked at as licensed rather than trying to redefine everything. I just personally feel like in the long term, the permanent fix is to redefine it. Make digital goods actual goods. Give them actual value. And I guess with that would come some responsibility on the consumer part, but that's okay. Generally, with more freedom comes more inconvenience. Let's just put it that way. Ask anyone that has actually tried to switch from something like a Mac to Linux. You know, Linux, you have to have a little bit of know-how. You got to put some elbow grease in to get things working the way you want them to, but you get a lot more control. And that's generally the trade-off in life as well. The more control you have over something, the more inconvenience there's going to be for it, or at least the more know-how you're going to have. I had been pretty irritated with Nintendo over the Pal World lawsuits and key cards, but leave it to Sony to make the last thing still irritating me seem like a good idea. The digital key cards are significantly better than absolutely nothing. Like, they're better by a mile. It's not even a small improvement. It's a significant improvement over absolutely nothing. So, taking a small aside to the other thing that irritates me, wasn't happy with them over the Pal World lawsuit, which is the reason why I hadn't covered any of their stuff on my channel for a long time, even though I've referenced it. But since the Pal World lawsuit at this point is very clearly going to cost them way more in terms of losing patents that they used to have than what it would have cost them to just let it go, I'm fine moving on with it. And it's also, they're not expected to, even if they do win, gain much more than a couple $1,000 compared to the cost of actually doing the lawsuit. So whatever. As far as I'm concerned, they have basically lost it at this point. So I'm good letting that go as well. And now back on topic. So the way I see it, there are only a few possible outcomes of this whole thing, and I'm going to start with the one that I think is the most likely, but that I want to happen the least, and that is that Sony follows through with their plans. They announced this so far ahead of time because they're wanting to get the outrage done and over with and let the outrage machine move on before they really start talking about the PlayStation 6. This also makes it so when they do actually start showing the PlayStation 6 and it being discless, that won't be a point of discussion because everyone will already anticipate it happening. I don't even think that they will really dive too much into the PS6 until they have actually stopped the production of discs. So to me, this is an implication that they're probably not going to start talking about it until around 2028 when they stop making discs themselves. And it's probably going to work. People's attention spans, even on the internet, or especially on the internet, tend to be very short. If they don't really put their foot in their mouth again for the next couple months, then it'll probably go away. I hope people really latch onto this and continue to torment them about it for a long time. I just don't think they're going to. I don't think most people are going to stick with it for very long outside of the actual hardcore collector and game preservation sphere. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I think is probably going to happen. If they get mockery about literally everything they announce from this point forward, they will eventually back down. If they see that it's not going away, this would cause them to have to reverse course, at least to a degree. Doesn't necessarily mean they wouldn't start finding other ways to really heavily skew the consumer away from physical media so they could try it again. But there you go. Everyone should remember that whole 30-day countdown timer thing. And even though it was supposedly a glitch, you could bet money that they were probably also doing that as a little bit of a thing to test the waters and see people's reactions when it popped up. So don't let stuff like that slide past as truly accidental either. Even though it was tied into another system and it didn't turn out to be a countdown timer for your needing to reconnect, that was a little bit of a test run that they had an easy out for. Factor into that if they announce something like a Bloodborne remake or something like that tomorrow, something similarly big, a good chunk of people would move on and be like, well, it's okay. So what about positive potential outcomes? People surprise me and actually continue to harass Sony into walking it back, even if they go as far as to limit physical releases to small number of copies. I would be okay with that. I understand trying to get manufacturing costs down. I just don't think that's the actual reason they want to do any of this. And I don't think anyone truly believes that's the reason why they want to do any of this. What's one way people could actually deliver a message right now? Mass cancellation of GTA 6 pre-orders. Just look at it and be like, well, combining you guys being discless with Sony announcing that they're no longer going to produce physical copies, I just can't support this choice right now. You would deliver a pretty big message to Rockstar and Sony both. As a small side note, you could also just wait to pre-order it when preloading actually becomes available. There's zero benefit to preloading right now. It doesn't give you early access to anything. There's no benefits. There's no point in pre-ordering it today. You could just set the money aside and wait till a little bit closer, and it would actually deliver a message. I don't think people are going to do this, though. It would be cool, but I don't think people are going to do it. I also don't think most of the people that are going to pre-order GTA is probably their only game that they're going to play. They're probably not tapped into this at all, and a good chunk of them probably don't care. It's like the people that keep going back to sports games year after year after year after year and just accepting the abuse, or people that buy COD every year and do nothing but complain about it. If you want something to change, you have to not buy it for a year or two. The absolute best possible outcome that would completely erase concern over the issue, even if it doesn't solve the collectability issue, lawmakers get off their ass and put in consumer protections for digital goods access. At this point, Sony and Amazon have both stolen from their consumers. Sony just wiped out 500 some odd movies. Amazon a little while back wiped out people's Luna libraries. This is going to keep happening unless there starts to be consequences for it. And right now, with them using the cover of the licenses rather than saying it's actual digital good, they can get away with it. But that would be easy to change. As for me, it won't make a huge difference, but what I'm going to personally start doing is going back, looking at my game library, looking at things that I actually enjoyed, and seeing which of them actually have physical releases. Because don't forget, one thing that they've probably used to skew the digital purchase numbers over physical purchases is there's a ton of indie games that you can only get digitally. Like, say, Mina the Hollower, one of the recent videos I did. That game, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a physical copy. I would like to buy one. I'd like to buy a physical copy of Hollow Knight. I haven't done that. I probably should go out and do that. I think there's one for the Switch. I have to look into it and see. I know they do limited physical runs, but most indie games don't do physical releases. They do digital only because they're small. They don't really have access to all the manufacturing power or all the things they need and the funding to be able to both make the game and produce physical copies. Some of them end up doing it later on as a special edition type of thing, but like, say, Binding of Isaac, there was no physical copy of Binding of Isaac for years. It even started out originally as a browser-based game. So that's probably skewing numbers quite a bit. I don't think me doing something like that is going to actually have a super big impact, but I have a lot more room now than I used to, so the reasoning behind going primarily physical or primarily digital rather than physical is gone. It's going to take a little bit of time because I got to mix in new game purchases with old game purchases, but I'm going to switch to primarily buying physical, even if it's something to test now. I don't think me doing it alone is going to have a big impact. If a big surge in physical sales across the board, though, you start seeing more and more people go physical first and digital second, then you might actually see that send a consumer wave towards Sony where they decide to maybe back down or at the very least delay their plans for a little bit. The problem is, well, one of the problems is if they've already committed to making the PS6 fully disc-free, you're probably not going to see them back down simply because they've already committed to that part of the manufacturing process, but who knows how far along they are in that. They've not exactly been sharing any details. Maybe an easy thing for them to switch up or make the disc an optional peripheral, so there won't be a disked system. All the systems would just be the baseline PlayStation with no disc, and you have to buy the disc as a peripheral, which, you know what, fine, I would accept that. But at the end of the day, I don't think much is really going to change their mind because I think that this is really about control over the software. They can't really delete something from your library and then sell it back to you as a remaster or remake a couple years down the line, or even just a couple months down the line, if you can just reinstall it from the disk. It's a bit of a cynical take, but I think that's part of it. I think they just like the idea that they can knock stuff out of your library and then sell it back to you so they can make profit more than once off of it. Oh, also, if they don't change their mind, I'm not investing in a PS6. It's already showing that they're going to be super expensive. And instead, that money will go towards a better PC. Like, even with hardware costs, I think I would rather pay even more than the next gen console and get a upgraded gaming PC that can do all the other stuff I need it to do than buy the PS6. Like, they don't have that many exclusives that I would really feel upset about missing out on. And I'll still have Nintendo to fall back on. They're probably going to ride the Switch 2 for the foreseeable future. They're also such a sort of going their own way type of company that I just don't see them moving away from physical editions. It just might become that their key cards become the standard rather than the exception. But I don't know. I kind of suspect at this point that the key cards was something they were pressured into making an option, because they don't seem to be doing it for any of their own stuff. And if it was them wanting to do it, they would probably make their own games key cards first rather than doing it second. But anyway, that's an aside. I'm fine sticking with PC and Nintendo. And if Nintendo did decide to go down the digital only route, they can join the list of things that I just won't be picking up, at least for the time being. So we'll see. I may end up eating my words on that in a couple of years, but for the time being, that's my plans. I'm not going to invest in a PlayStation for 5 games when I could probably save up, build a new PC that not only would be good for gaming, but also would function for a lot of the other needs I need it to. I'm not investing that much money into a console that doesn't respect my ownership rights of the material on the console. So, anyway, that's just my thoughts on the whole situation. Hopefully a light appears at the end of the tunnel, but until it does, keep gaming, and remember, if I can beat it, so can you.